Nightfarers, it's time to take on the Nightlords and cleanse Limveld of their dark presence. But before you do that, you need to know what character gives you the greatest chance of personal success. My name is Kodiak, this is Legacy Gaming, and today we're sharing everything you need to know about all 8 characters in the game after extensively testing each one and putting them through their paces. Elden Ring Nightreign features 8 powerful characters, 6 of which are available from the very first moments you fire up the game. Each comes with a passive effect, a class skill, and an ultimate art, and these help define the character's playstyle. Once you're in the game, you can read more about each character in the visual codex, which also gives you key information about their weapon scaling, something that's not visible unless you go into the menus. Our goal isn't to tell you what character is best, but which is best for you, based on your playstyle. If you're looking for a well-rounded, easy-to-pick-up and play character in Elden Ring Nightreign, then look no further than the Wylder, a swordsman with balanced scaling, making his options during an expedition incredibly flexible. The Wylder's passive ability is called Sixth Sense, which allows him to cheat death a single time, an effect that can only be used once. However, you can refresh the passive 2 different ways. The first is by reaching a Site of Grace, and the second is by being revived from a down state by a teammate. Essentially, you get 2 lives for every 1 you expend, which makes this one of the most forgiving characters to play in the game. The Wylder has a relatively balanced scaling with an A scaling for strength and HP, a B scaling for dexterity and stamina, and a C scaling for intelligence, faith, arcane, and FP. As far as weapons go, you have a huge range of possibilities, but obviously strength and dexterity weapons will perform best based on the Wylder's scaling. In theory, he can use practically any melee weapon and even does well with ranged weapons, but the preference would be to use a greatsword, something that scales perfectly and gives him enough versatility in melee range. The Wylder's character skill is called Claw Shot. When activated, he shoots out a grappling claw that can lock onto a target and drag them towards the player. Although the claw will only attach to one enemy, it will deal damage to any enemies in its path, which can be useful even though it doesn't do a whole lot of damage. On shielded enemies, it will temporarily stagger them, giving you a small opening to attack. On larger enemies, the Wylder is pulled towards the target, and this is pretty unique because you maintain momentum. During the pull, you're in a sprinting state, so you can use that to your advantage to either deal a sprinting attack or jump for a jumping strong attack. The Wylder's ultimate art is Onslaught Stake. When used, this launches a close-range iron stake at an enemy in a huge explosion. This ability actually has 2 variations. When simply activating the ability, you'll deal a decent amount of damage in a smaller AoE, while simultaneously sending your character straight backwards. Using the ultimate art this way only reduces your charge by 75%, making it a bit easier to build back up. If you hold the ability, you'll have to spend a little time charging it up, but when released, it'll deal considerably more damage in a larger AoE. When charged, you also don't fly backwards, keeping you close to your target, which is nice, considering that a fully charged Onslaught Stake will almost always break the stance of an enemy, leaving them susceptible to a follow-up critical attack. The Wylder's versatility makes him one of the most flexible characters throughout an expedition. Because he's proficient with practically any melee weapon, you have a broad palette to choose from when selecting your rewards. As always, you want to be mindful of the affinity the expedition boss is susceptible to, but unlike most of the other characters in the game, you'll be able to consider far more choices given your scaling. During an expedition, your job is to be out front drawing the enemy's attention away from the ranged, and also pulling enemies to you that are either attacking your teammates or on the fringe of a group. This keeps your team focused on enemies in a more central place, which should speed up your time to kill. Your ultimate can be an absolute game changer on bosses, and in almost every scenario, you'll want to use the charged variant, except when you're about to be attacked. It can take a little practice to understand how much time you need to execute the ability, but after a few runs, that'll become second nature. If you prefer to put a little distance between you and the many horrors within Limveld, then check out the Ironeye, one of just a couple pure ranged characters in Elden Ring Nightreign. Their passive ability is called Eagle Eye, which allows them to discover more items from enemies. This effect also extends to your squad, making it a fantastic passive to have on your team. The Ironeye scaling fits its very specific playstyle, with an A scaling for dexterity, a B scaling for stamina and arcane, a C scaling for HP, FP, and strength, and a D scaling for faith and intelligence. As far as weapons go, this one is easy, guys. the Ironeye should be using bows, plain and simple. Your strength is that you can provide range support to the mostly melee heroes in the game, and when it comes to boss fights, ranged is a huge boon as the enemies usually run away from melee players, forcing them to constantly chase the target throughout a fight. I wouldn't discount melee weapons though. Your A scaling for dexterity and B scaling for arcane does give you some flexibility, and there are plenty of dexterity focused weapons in the game, but as far as your moveset goes, everything is tailored around ranged gameplay. Ironeye's character skill is called Marking. This is a melee ability that, when triggered, causes the Ironeye to dash in a straight line in a given direction. You can manipulate which direction you charge regardless of the enemy you're locked onto, making this a versatile skill not only for engaging an enemy, but also avoiding enemy attacks as you are invulnerable during the animation. When you hit an enemy with the ability, a red X will appear on their body, indicating that they're marked, and while under this effect, they'll take 10% more damage from all sources. When an enemy is marked, you'll want to focus all your damage on that target, because repeated attacks have a chance to break the mark, staggering the foe and dealing a large burst of damage. The damage required to break the mark is dependent on the amount of HP the target has, with higher HP enemies like bosses requiring more damage to break the mark than lower HP enemies. I personally also enjoy using this ability to hit multiple enemies. Because you can easily manipulate the direction you lunge, it's very possible to hit a small handful of enemies with a single marking. You can also hit an enemy and then redirect a different direction, which is helpful for repositioning. After it's charged up, you can unleash the Ironeye's ultimate art, Single Shot. After a brief delay, this fires a single powerful arrow that passes through all enemies, terrain, and structures, dealing high damage and staggering any enemies hit. Shortly after the arrow hits the enemy, a shockwave will follow, dealing damage along the same path but in a much larger AoE. Single Shot also ignores all enemy defenses, which means it's an effective attack against any enemy in the game, and that includes bosses that have different resistances. What I like best about this ability is that during its animation, you are completely immune to damage, which makes it about as easy of a skill to pull off as possible. Personally, I like saving this to disrupt a big boss attack or when my team clearly needs a breather, but you don't want to hold it too long, because every second you wait is more time you could be charging up the ultimate art again for another attack. I should also point out that you can charge this ability for some extra damage. As one of the few pure range characters, Ironeye is about as easy mode as it gets in Nightreign. You have an unlimited supply of arrows, can largely avoid the ire of enemy aggro, and once you master how to use marking, you become a key part of your team's DPS. One of the biggest challenges with this character is stamina, which is key to everything you do. Early on, you really need to pace your attacks because your stamina bar is so small, but as you level up, that becomes less of a factor. You also need to be careful not to fall too far behind your teammates. Because you're often at the extreme edges of a fight, and because the pace of the game is very fast, it's easy to fall behind your melee counterparts as they rush from point to point without much delay. Keep yourself relatively close by for easy marking, but still far enough away to avoid enemy AoE attacks. Finally, experiment with the different range weapons in the game. I'm not a huge fan of things like the great bows, but when you don't have to worry about ammo, and with two teammates to draw aggro, they're actually incredibly fun to use. When it comes to being the center of enemies' attention, look no further than the Guardian, a master of crowd control, and the class most capable at tanking incoming attacks, including from the Nightlords themselves. The core element of the Guardian's kit centers around his passive ability, Steel Guard. While most characters can equip and block with shields, the Guardian takes this to another level by being able to plant his feet and brace with his shield for a much more powerful guard. While guarding, hold B and move in the direction of your target. You'll enter a state that slowly drains your stamina, locks you into a slowly moving state, and massively improves your guard boost. While in this form, you can absorb more attacks as your stamina pool increases. Knowing that the Guardian is going to be your team's anchor, his scaling reflects this. He has an S scaling in HP, an A scaling in stamina, a B scaling in strength, a C scaling in FP, faith, arcane, and dexterity, and a D scaling in intelligence. Because of this scaling, buffing the Guardian's HP and stamina pools through items has a massive impact, allowing him to absorb much more damage and maintain his defensive posture almost indefinitely. Weapon-wise, some of his base abilities and augmentations play off of halberds, and while they don't scale as well with strength, there are enough buffs and attacks the Guardian can play into that make them worth using. If that doesn't end up being your playstyle, the strength-focused weapons like greatswords, axes and great axes, hammers, and colossal weapons all make solid choices for a more offensive-focused player. The thing you definitely need to look out for, though, are the shields, especially those with buffs or effects that boost your poise or generate more threat to ensure you remain the tank within your group. The Guardian's character skill, Whirlwind, allows him to charge up and release a wing beat that generates a cyclone, knocking enemies into the air and dealing a chunk of damage in the process. Enemies in the AoE are pulled towards the center, which helps set up other attacks from your allies, while also blocking small projectiles during the animation. You can even hold this ability down prior to releasing it to increase the AoE size. As you progress the Guardian's personal journey, called a Remembrance, you'll eventually be able to increase the duration of this skill, turning it from pretty good to insanely good, allowing it to linger for 3 to 4 seconds when used. This helps create an area of projectile denial for your team, but can also be used to constantly stagger more elite enemies or quickly farm entire groups of weaker enemies with one attack. When it comes to Nightreign's support characters, there is simply no better choice than the Guardian, thanks to his ultimate art, Wings of Salvation. When activated, you'll leap into the air, with a brief window to shift your position before diving back down onto a targeted area. Upon landing, you'll deal damage to enemies while also creating a protective aura for your teammates. This can even be used to instantly revive an ally that's knocked out if they are within the AoE of your slam. However, the key with this is to only use the skill in a situation where an ally can't be easily revived, because drawing aggro and creating a window for your ally to attack the downed teammate is better than wasting a long cooldown on a relatively easy revive. A good rule of thumb is to wait for a downed ally to be at least 2 to 3 pips into their revive meter before using your ultimate. If you can revive 2 players at the same time, even better, making this an ability that can repeatedly save a run so long as you stay alive. As the only true capable tank in Nightreign, the Guardian needs to be extremely aware when it's time to defend and when it's time to go on the offense. 99% of the time, being in your guard state will allow you to soak almost any attack, short of pure magic AoEs, and even then, you still have reduced damage compared to your teammates. Your job is to stay alive in case you need to rescue a squishier ally. Additionally, if you can manage to find buffs that increase your threat generation, the Guardian can keep bosses or specific high-threat enemies engaged and focused on you. This allows your teammates the freedom to tackle mechanics, split focus during multi-enemy encounters, and keep their resources from being depleted too quickly. When your allies do go down, if the situation is salvageable through conventional revive mechanics, save that ultimate art. But if things get too hairy, don't be afraid to burn your ultimate and get both your teammates back into the fight. When you find windows of opportunity to deal damage, take them, and embrace your Whirlwind ability to add to those moments. Passive health regeneration, stamina recovery speed, and increases to poise and threat generation should all be top of your list for making the Guardian as reliable as possible. If you're looking for an all-gas, no-brakes, massive weapon-wielding machine, then turn your attention to Raider. He's all about big hits, powering through enemy attacks, staggers, and delivering critical hits to even the toughest of enemies. Raider's passive is really unique compared to most other characters in the game. It incentivizes him taking some damage in order to boost the potency of his character skill, Retaliate. However, the really cool thing about this passive is that it allows the Raider to survive with 1 HP after taking a source of damage that would otherwise kill him, which is absolutely game-changing for a frontline brawler. As you'd suspect, Raider's scaling is completely in line with his role. He has an S scaling in Strength, an A scaling in HP and Stamina, a C scaling in Dexterity and Arcane, and a D scaling for FP, Faith, and Intelligence. Your goal at all times should be to pump Strength, because you want to keep juicing your insane amount of damage and stagger, allowing you to more effectively and reliably deal with bigger threats. It's really as simple as that. When it comes to weapons, you actually have a lot of potent options, but again, all of these heavily capitalize on strength. You'll be aiming for things like great axes, great hammers, and other colossal weapons, because these, in particular, lean the most towards stagger. Raider's character skill is Retaliate, which, when activated, has you assume an attack stance and delivers a charged attack that grants near infinite poise, keeping you from being staggered while reducing all incoming damage during the attack. If you do take damage during the attack, your passive kicks in, and powers up your attack to deal more damage and can even stagger giant enemies. This won't work on hard-to-hit, agile enemies unless you have god-tier timing and knowledge of enemy attack patterns, so you should intentionally be on the lookout for slow, heavily telegraphed attacks to bring out the full potency of this skill. Your ultimate art, Totem Stella, summons a massive stone pillar that blocks projectiles, radiates a protective aura, and boosts the strength of nearby allies. It's a massive damage swing, especially in a strength-focused team composition that also allows you to abuse verticality and the climb mechanic to your advantage. One of the benefits is that ranged allies can stand atop this temporary structure and rain down damage from relative safety. The totem can also be used to block a charging enemy, avoiding an otherwise deadly wave of damage, or completely stop a larger enemy in their tracks, forcing them to navigate around it. Also, don't forget that, like most other ultimate arts in the game, activating the skill grants you temporary invulnerability while casting, which can allow you to completely ignore a mechanic or powerful attack when timed correctly. You can get really creative here, and your only real limitation is your imagination. If you want to be up in an enemy's face, play the Raider. Use Retaliate when it's off cooldown on larger, slower moving attacks in order to maximize your damage and stagger potential with the skill. Combine that with colossal weapons, specifically ones with affinities that enemies are weak to, which will allow you to continuously do massive damage and constant staggers, opening them up for frequent critical blow opportunities. We recommend stocking up on grease, especially for the final boss fight, which will allow you to put all the pieces of your kit together and capitalize on your potential to deal momentum-shifting damage. Gear-wise, you really want to keep an eye out for things that augment your critical blow damage or rally-type buffs, such as dealing damage after taking damage in order to return health. Amidst all this, taking a few stamina recovery buffs can be a godsend for this character, since you'll need to closely pay attention to how much stamina you have at all times, while juggling between pursuing enemies and swinging those massive weapons. Most characters will use Surge Sprint as it's the default sprint, but in combat while on the Raider, this will deplete your stamina bar far too quickly. Instead, try to get used to holding B to run. It won't be nearly as fast, but will allow you to get into range of enemies or stay near allies reliably without consuming stamina. At the end of the day, the goal here is to draw aggro from your allies, tank the enemy's damage, and overpower them through retaliation. If all goes well, you'll constantly have enemies in a stagger state, setting up your allies for copious amounts of free damage. If you gravitate to spellcasters, especially ones that are complex and difficult to master, then check out the Recluse, a character that can mix together the elemental residues left on their targets in order to conjure over a dozen unique spells based on these siphoned combinations. Her passive ability is Elemental Defense, which allows you to discover affinity residues created from affinity attacks on targets or when allies are embracing a certain affinity with their own attacks. These are denoted by specific colored rings that appear at the targeting location on both enemies and allies. Activating her character skill will collect the current residue, filling one of 3 empty nodes on her character skill and replenishing a portion of your FP in the process. The Recluse's specific scaling enables her magic-focused offense with an S scaling for intelligence and faith, an A scaling for FP, a C scaling for stamina, dexterity, and arcane, and a D scaling for HP and strength. As far as weapons, you really don't have a massive range of effective choices. Technically, Nightreign does allow characters to use any weapon as a baseline, but when characters such as the Recluse have such specific attribute scaling, you are more limited if you want to be effective. With a high intelligence and faith stat, seals and staves are your most obvious and recommended path. Melee or other ranged weapons that embrace faith scaling can also be great options, and we genuinely recommend all Recluse players have at least one weapon that doesn't tap into your FP pool in order to reliably and quickly revive teammates in the heat of combat. Nothing feels worse than being on that last tick of a revive and your FP runs out. Try and focus on buffing the stats that affect whatever magic school you are focusing on during a run, and keep a lookout for things that increase your casting speed while reducing FP cost. Recluse's character skill, Magic Cocktail, is a ranged ability with 0 cooldown that has multiple functions depending on the state of her skill. It starts with 3 completely empty nodes around the skill icon, and these can be filled with affinity residues. Think of these as elemental stains. Whenever you or an ally damages an enemy with an elemental effect, a colored ring based on the element type will appear at the targeting pip of that enemy or even an ally. Activating this skill will siphon that residue, refilling a portion of your mana each time and slotting that residue in one of the 3 slots around the skill icon. Once you siphon 3 residues, the skill will become a powerful, free-cost magic cocktail based on the combination of residues. This means to be an effective Recluse, you're going to have to juggle spells and incantations on multiple stabs and seals to generate the respective affinities you need depending on your situation. In total, there are 14 different spell combinations across magic, fire, lightning, and holy affinities, which we'll leave on the screen now so that you can see all potential mixes. 4 skills are made from simply siphoning the same affinity 3 times, 6 skills are made from combining 2 different affinities, and 4 skills are created through a combination of 3 different affinities. The more complex the spell combination, the more powerful the resulting spell often is. For instance, mixing magic, fire, and holy will allow you to spew a mixed affinity breath that inflicts solid damage in a frontal cone, but also restores HP and FP of allies within the AoE. What's important to keep in mind is that once your spell becomes an active ability, you lose the ability to siphon additional affinities until that spell is cast, and that means your ability to gain FP goes away temporarily. For that reason, you need to really be conscious of how much you're spamming your skills that cost FP, and when you're siphoning to regenerate FP and build your next spell cocktail. Once charged up and in the right situation, you can unleash your ultimate art, Soul Blood Song. This ability is extremely straightforward. When used, you become immune to all damage until the cast is complete, and after a short duration, all enemies in a relatively large AoE will become branded with blood sigils. Branded enemies will take increased damage and restore the HP and FP of those attacking them. Additionally, if you have an ally that has 1 bar of their revive meter depleted, this ability will deal exactly that much damage. However, we wouldn't say it's the best ultimate art for reviving teammates. In general, this is best used to amplify damage on an enemy or help conserve you and your team's resources during a fight. The Recluse is currently the only character in the game that has the ability to keep her FP meter filled almost always, and because of that, she fills a very specific niche of a dedicated spellcaster and affinity dealer on any team composition. You really don't want to be in melee range of enemies, so leading your expedition or initiating encounters isn't wise when playing a Recluse, but at the same time, you don't want to be so far away that landing your spell projectiles results in too many misses. It's essential to juggle between enough spells being cast that when you siphon an affinity, it replenishes equal, if not more, than what you've spent already. Also, due to your poor HP scaling, the Recluse really can't take that many hits, so maintaining a high stamina pool and stamina recovery through buffs that you find can be essential to her survival in those tougher fights. If you can manage to find at least 3 or 4 affinities on as few weapon swaps as possible during a run, you'll have a much easier time juggling the respective residues you need to cast the appropriate concoctions for each encounter. A good rule of thumb is to always maintain a pure magic or a mixed magic and fire concoction on enemies as often as possible. These tracking projectiles will constantly apply magic or fire residues respectively, and makes managing your FP pool and future mixes much easier while also dealing constant damage to your target. Don't forget, when your FP is low, you can always look to your allies if either is using any sort of elemental affinity and siphon that off of them for some free FP. If you're looking for a character that is extremely reliant on player skill, the Executor should be on your radar. When using his Cursed Sword active ability, he'll be able to enter a stance that allows him to parry attacks unlike any other character in the game, at the cost of his mobility, and if you love two-handed, dual-wield, and all-around sword gameplay, you will thoroughly enjoy this character. The Executor's passive ability, Tenacity, grants you a boost to attack and stamina recovery speed after recovering from status ailments. It's certainly a more nice-to-have passive rather than something you need to fully rely on, but if you manage the perfect setup where you can self-proc ailments and remove them easily, it's a fantastic way to juice your most important stats in a fight. When it comes to attribute scaling, the Executor probably has one of the best setups across all characters. An S scaling for Dexterity and Arcane, which is simply stacked, a B scaling for HP and Stamina, a C scaling for Strength, and a D scaling for FP, Intelligence, and Faith. If this didn't immediately make you think of 2 things, allow me to lay it out for you. Katanas and bleed damage. Having an S scaling in Dexterity and Arcane is the perfect setup to reap the maximum benefits of katanas and bleed, regardless if you are dual-wielding or two-handing them. You can also make do with other bladed weapons such as twin blades and curved swords, but if you can find them during a run, katanas with bleeds will serve you best. The Executor's character skill, Cursed Sword, enables him to be a damage powerhouse, while also making him one of the most potent duelists in-game, capable of holding the attention of even boss enemies and tanking their attacks through skill alone. When activated, you'll draw your Cursed Sword, entering a new stance that removes your ability to run, but massively increases your ability to parry enemy attacks. By repeatedly parrying, you'll reveal the Enchanted Blade, eventually reaching full power. From there, you can go on the offensive, attacking like you would with any other weapon, and giving you a greater chance at staggering enemies into critical blow opportunities. After a few hits with the fully charged sword, you can use left trigger to unleash a special, high damage attack, reverting the sword back to its dormant state. While you're in this form, you're going to crit a lot more, and as such, you should be on the lookout for buffs and items that improve your crit damage. If you master your parry timing with this skill active, you will quickly become a force to be reckoned with. The Executor's ultimate art, Aspects of the Crucible Beast, takes things to another level. When activated, you'll enter a large beast form, gaining all new attacks in the process. When activated, you'll fully heal and gain a massive temporary HP increase. Using attacks while in this form will drain your ultimate meter, and once gone, you'll revert back to your original form. While in this beast form, you have access to some standard melee attacks, jump attacks, a huge distance dash, and a powerful attack that will almost always pull you out of the form, which is on your L2. While you might feel unkillable, you are far from it and still need to be careful with your positioning and attack timing. Yes, it does great damage, but we actually found that one of the best reasons to utilize this form is to save your teammates. Because you are much tankier during this ultimate and attack relatively quickly, you can use this to ignore some boss mechanics entirely while wailing on your allies, getting them back in the fight. When it comes to playstyle best practices with the Executor, it really comes down to overall skill and encounter knowledge. You'll want to be using a combination of two-handed and dual-wield attacks to deliver offense in situations where you need that mobility. When you need to get defensive, bust out the Cursed Blade and parry away, powering up your Cursed Blade until you have a window to go on the offensive. Your strikes with this weapon actually consume extremely little stamina when powered up and hit much harder, so deliver as many attacks as you safely can before pivoting back into parrying. You'll dance between your standard weapons and your Cursed Blade constantly, and that dance will get much easier the more time you spend with the character. While scouring the world for loot, be on the lookout for items that boost your ultimate so you have access to beast form more often. On top of that, be on the lookout for items and relics that boost your damage, stamina gain, and heal through critical blows, since you'll be triggering these a lot. One of the best buffs you can find is one that improves your dodge window, and if you're on a team and you see this thing drop, be a good squad mate and give it to an Executor, allowing him to play more confidently in his Cursed Blade stance. If you're looking for an extremely agile, hit-and-run style character that acts as a force multiplier on your team, look no further than the elusive Duchess. She's a character that requires awareness and solid team communication to unleash her kit at the right time, but when played correctly can maximize any team's DPS in ways you wouldn't believe. Unlike other characters in Nightreign, the Duchess isn't a starting character, and you'll need to unlock her. Thankfully, it isn't complicated or even difficult to do, you just need to know where to look. Once you've beaten Tricephalos, the first boss in the game that gatekeeps literally everything, you'll get a talisman called the Old Pocket Watch. If you take this to the Priestess in White at Roundtable Hold, you'll be given the option to give it to her. Don't worry, you'll get the item back even if you give it to her, and in the process, she'll reveal herself as the Duchess, unlocking her as a playable character. The Duchess' passive ability is called Magnificent Poise, and it's one of the most straightforward passives in the game. Not only does it reduce the stamina cost of your attacks and dodges, but the Duchess is also able to dodge twice back-to-back with unique animations. This allows her to be extremely mobile in comparison to the other characters in the game. When it comes to attribute scaling, the Duchess doesn't appear that impressive at first. She has an A scaling for Intelligence, a B scaling for FP, Dexterity, and Faith, a C scaling for HP and Arcane, and a D scaling for Stamina and Strength. Having an A scaling in Intelligence means magic-imbued weapons, primarily staves, which scale well here, are worth seeking out since she gets a decent amount of FP over the course of a run if you are efficiently leveling her up. These not only provide solid ranged or affinity options, but can be a solid source of burst damage to combo with her character skill. However, most of the time you're going to want to embrace high dexterity and faith scaling weapons. She mainly prefers daggers due to her hit-and-run playstyle and affinity to burst damage, but she can make use of other options such as S-scaling rapiers, katanas with built-in bleed status effects, and A-scaling curved swords. Duchess' character skill Restage is the foundation of what makes her such a successful character on a team. When activated, you'll essentially rewind time, reapplying around 50% of the damage enemies have taken over the last few seconds. What's better still is it can be used at nearly any time, while attacking, dodging, after being knocked down. It's a really flexible skill that allows you to activate it essentially when you need it. This makes it great for coordinating massive damage spikes with your team, either via synced ultimates or big hits from their attacks in a short period of time. One of the best combos is when you have an Ironeye on your team. Once he successfully puts the mark on a target and everyone teams up to break it, you can restage that mark break, giving your team a huge burst of damage. The same could be said for potent status effects such as bleed proccing huge chunks of damage or doubling down on critical blows after an enemy is stunned. Finale, Duchess Ultimate Art has a lot of versatility and nuance that you can abuse. When activated, you'll obscure not only yourself but surrounding allies entirely from foes, causing them to instantly drop all aggro and wander aimlessly. While casting, you do get a brief period of iframes to dodge incoming attacks, but once invisible, if you're hit, you will instantly be revealed. Overall, it's an incredible ability that has both offensive and defensive implications. Defensively, you can use this to grant your team a moment of respite, allowing them to catch their breath, plan their next series of attacks, heal, or even safely revive an ally. As long as you aren't attacking an enemy or receiving damage, you won't be revealed, so this can quite literally save a run during a boss fight when used properly. Offensively, you can use invisibility to position you and your allies behind enemies to execute critical attacks for a really potent initiation. You will lose the invisibility right after, but if there is no need for revives anytime soon, this could help accelerate your world farming. As the character most capable of a hit and run, it's important to really get a feeling for when you can deliver the most amount of damage in the shortest possible window before actually running away. You always want to be close enough to the action that when a window of opportunity opens, you're there to capitalize. Since the Duchess can hit so often with fast weapons, affinity application is also a breeze, and considering that Restage also causes buildup, things like bleed are standout choices to focus on with your build. You should always be looking for the chance to use Restage, as those opportunities for large damage spikes can swing the momentum of a fight. The skill comes back off cooldown often, so don't be afraid to use it frequently. If you're only saving it for big bursts of damage, you'll actually be losing out on a ton of extra damage. A key thing to keep in mind with the Duchess is that you need to maintain enough free stamina to safely dodge. You should always have free stamina if you aren't overcommitting, and by that we mean don't just spam your attacks until you are simply out. Always save some stamina for dodge, because even a little bit goes a long way thanks to her passive, but it won't save you if you have no stamina. Given her low HP pool, mistakes can prove fatal, so it's one of the most important aspects to master with her kit. Some other things to consider are using your backdash into lunge attack, because you can cancel backdash with a forward lunging attack almost immediately, allowing you to use those iframes to be more consistently on offense. Also, make sure you understand your combo strings, because there is a huge difference between a one-handed dagger chain going up to 7+ hits and a dual-wield dagger setup having 4 attacks composed of multiple hits. Finally, remember that you can embrace the A scaling of your intelligence and S scaling of magic staves, allowing for some really potent burst damage with your Restage. If you're looking for a character built around spirit summons, faith damage, and a potent team revive, look no further than the Revenant. She requires a bit more micromanagement than other available characters once unlocked, but her kit has a lot of utility that is tailor-made for Nightreign's squad-based gameplay. Once you unlock the Duchess, head over to the Jar Bazaar and purchase the Besmirched Frame. You'll want to then head to the east wing of Roundtable Hold and locate the phantom of a young woman in the corner of the room. Interact with her and she'll teleport you back to the restricted area of Limveld, where you'll find her in the runes directly ahead of you. There, you must defeat the Revenant and her 3 spirits in order to add her as a playable character. We recommend doing this on the Ironeye, which seems to be the path of least resistance, as you attempt to juggle multiple enemies by yourself. The Revenant's passive ability, Necromancy, really shows its usefulness while farming Limveld and during encounters where multiple enemies are present. As you eliminate targets, you have a chance at raising that very enemy as a ghost, which will temporarily fight for you. These provide a solid 10 to 15 seconds of distraction and damage, all at the cost of simply killing things. In terms of her attribute scaling, the Revenant is a bit of an oddball, with an S scaling in Faith, an A scaling in FP, a B scaling in Intelligence and Arcane, a C scaling for Strength and Dexterity, and D scaling for HP and Stamina. As you can see, the Revenant is intended to focus more on casting and magic-based items, particularly ones that are faith-aligned, such as incantations. The only downside is, unlike the Recluse, she has no reliable way to regenerate her FP, which can be a real issue if you lean heavily in that direction. As we played the Revenant more, it became clear you'll want to use incantations and magic sparingly, unless you manage to find a weapon that gives you FP back on successive hits. If you do manage to find that buff, you're looking for weapons like scythes or anything wholly infused to regenerate FP and then switch to incantations and sorceries when your FP pool is full. Revenant's character skill, Summon Spirit, is really that secret sauce that makes this character what it is. When activated, you get the option to summon one of 3 fallen family members to battle. Helen is an agile swordsman who can attack quickly but is very squishy. Frederick is one of those giant pumpkin heads with a hammer that deals great damage and stagger while tanking a good amount of damage in return. Finally, there's Sebastian, a giant skeletal construct that attacks slowly but delivers heavy damage and heavy stagger but can't move. Each of these spirits have their own health bars, and when killed, you'll need to summon another family member to battle while they regenerate. These summons can be used to tank enemy attacks, draw aggro from bosses, and even deliver damage in more dangerous situations, while Revenant either hits and runs with her weapons or pokes with range damage from afar. You'll really want to socket relics and look for buffs that enhance the fallen family, because even at a base level, they are incredible resources to put to use. Her summons also have a really cool feature where if you target a downed ally while summoning them, they will deal damage to that ally in an attempt to revive them. This makes her exceptional as a support character that, if played correctly, can pretty reliably save teammates from certain death while keeping herself as safe as possible. Revenant's ultimate art, Immortal March, is a really interesting ability that does a lot more than the tooltip suggests. When cast, yourself and allies will receive a buff for about 10 seconds that prevents your HP from falling below 1. This gives you an opportunity during a high-pressure situation to avoid major damage mechanics or allows everyone to simply pump damage without worrying about defense. If used while nearby a downed ally, it will automatically revive them, reinforcing Revenant as a solid support character on any team. Finally, Immortal March directly enhances each of her summons, allowing them to cast their ultimates when they are active at the same time as she does her ultimate art. Helen does an immediate quick burst of thrust at her target, Frederick changes to doing 2 spinning attacks into a powerful slam, and Sebastian targets enemies with a long-lasting death beam from range. Revenant occupies a unique space within a team comp. She's part tank via her summons, but given the right buffs and gear, she can also competently damage even the strongest targets. With a relatively low HP pool, she doesn't want to be the target, preferring to dance on the edge of combat and poke at enemies when the opportunity is right. Juggling her summons will help output solid damage and keep the heat off of you and your teammates, but you also have to manage when to resummon and reposition them, since some enemies can make short work of your summoned allies, putting them on a much longer cooldown. If you can secure a potent ranged holy build, the Revenant can really shine, dealing damage and keeping her ultimate constantly charging. If your team is doing well and has a lot of resources, get aggressive with Immortal March, keeping your team from dropping below 1 HP for a short time, pumping damage and augmenting your current summon to deal even more damage. If your team is showing cracks in their armor, reserve that ultimate to revive your allies when a 2 or 3 revive pip is too hard to damage down. If you stick to these major pillars of her playstyle, she can be an invaluable ally during your expeditions. So there you have it, our ultimate guide to characters in Elden Ring Nightreign after playing the game for over 100 hours during our early access period. Guys, we put a ton of time into playing and mastering each of these characters, so if you appreciate the work that goes into making these videos, do me a solid, hit that thumbs up, and consider subscribing. We'll have more Elden Ring in your feed soon, so keep it right here and never miss a thing. My name is Kodiak, and from everyone here at Legacy Gaming, thanks for watching, and play on.